So welcome to In Crisis South Africa. I'm Ileana Kokotis. I'm a psychologist. I've been in private practice for 20 years. And In Crisis South Africa was born out of the desire and the idea to educate people about mental health, because we're seeing an increase in mental health issues. And I really am passionate about telling people more about different health issues and actually giving people hope that we can actually deal with mental health. It's not a life sentence. It doesn't mean that it's something that you can't recover from. So we're going to be sharing people's stories, and I'm delighted to welcome Joanne, who is our first guest, and she's going to chat about her experience with panic attacks. And hopefully that will give our viewers some insights and some help with regards to how to deal with panic attacks. So welcome, Joanne.
Hi.
Very lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you've had a journey with panic attacks.
A long journey, yes.
Okay, and how long did you suffer from panic attacks?
For about 10 years or so.
Okay, and how did you deal with them?
One day at a time. You face it when it arrives. Mine were waking up in the middle of the night with a panic attack. I never got panic attacks during the day. It was almost all the time I woke up into a panic attack.
Okay, and can you maybe just explain what a panic attack is for those people that don't know? Like
yes,
what
it's you wake up and you're suffocating. You can't breathe. You have to loosen your clothes or take your clothes off, run to a window and try to catch a little bit of air that's coming through the window. It just feels actually like somebody kicked you in the chest. That's what it felt like when it happened.
Okay, so you struggled to breathe and you felt
yes,
like you were suffocating.
Yes.
Any other physical symptoms? Because I think it can be quite debilitating.
No, it's just death. You just feel death is on your doorstep when it happens. It just feels like you are dying.
Okay, like a feeling of dread.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And actually panic attacks, I mean, there are a lot of people that actually go to the emergency room. They think they're having a heart attack, they have heart palpitations. So a lot of people actually, really do suffer immensely with them. And they often think it's something physical. They end up going to the emergency room because it's quite frightening.
It's very frightening, but because mine happened in the middle of the night, I did not want to wake up my family and get them all panicky. So I had to deal with it myself. Also, you can't just take your clothes and run outside. It's in the middle of the night. So you have to deal with it within your home. Run to a window, loosen up your clothes. That did help me. These panic attacks lasted for about 10 minutes at a time.
Okay.
And then slowly, you start breathing again. And you're back to normal.
Okay. And what else helped you? I mean, you said getting some air.
What helped me is trying to relax before going to bed. Having maybe some basil tea just to calm me down and be in a relaxed mode. And that helped quite a bit, I would think, but they're unexpected. They just happen.
They do come out of nowhere. Okay,
yes.
So
yeah.
As you say, you could be absolutely fine, and then suddenly.
Yes, and you might get an attack now, and you might get one in a week's time, or in a month's time, or in 2 months' time. You can't predict when they're arriving to prepare yourself for it.
So can I ask you, Joanne, how did that impact on you? Because if you've got no control, if you, as you say, in a shopping centre, and you suddenly feel, I mean, you said it was at night, but other people can have it when they're, in a social setting, and it can be quite scary. So if there is no predictability, if you don't know when it's going to, occur, how did you deal with that?
All you can do in that scenario is to try and calm yourself down, and think that you're in a nicer place than you are right now. And try and pull yourself out of that darkness that you're in. because it's just darkness. All you feel is just, there's nothing there. It's just darkness, and it's you in this darkness, and you can't get out of it. So you try and calm yourself down by maybe having a glass of water,
Okay, very important.
that type of thing, and then air, you know, get a little fan, try and get some air into you until you are able to start talking and calming yourself down where you can breathe.
Okay, so I think another thing that you said that's quite important is maybe to imagine being somewhere else.
Yes, yes.
So if you had to, for example, imagine being at the sea or, you know, in the woods.
Yes,
or
yes.
somewhere different, so it kind of distracts your mind.
A place that you fell in love with at some stage of your life, whether it's in Greece or Cyprus or at the sea or at the mountain. Waterfalls do it for me. A waterfall, a beautiful waterfall, can bring me back to reality and back to normality again.
Okay, so I think that's really, really helpful.
Yes.
Okay, is to imagine being in a safe space, in a place where
Free.
you were relaxed, where you were free.
Yes.
That's an excellent way to calm your nervous system, because obviously in that moment,
Yes.
your nervous
Yes.
system is completely overwhelmed. You
Yes.
also mentioned drinking something. Okay, so if
Yes.
we had to kind of engage in our different senses, you know, in an effort to calm the nervous system, you know, drinking something,
Yes.
you know, swallowing, sucking on a piece of ice,
Yes.
takes us, I think, out of our mind, you know, where that anxiety and that dread sits,
Yes.
and it brings you back into your body.
Yes.
Another way, I think, could also be, you know, going outside in the garden, you know, looking at nature, maybe taking your shoes off, you know, touching some grass, so that your mind is calmer. It kind of brings you out, I think, of that.
It
that
depends
anxious
when it
state.
happens, because if it happens in the middle of the night and you are in Johannesburg, really you can't walk outside
Sure.
into the garden. I would love to do that, because I think that would be your happy space. If you could go out into your garden and put your foot in the swimming pool or something like that, it will bring you back to reality. But you can't do it, unfortunately, if it's happening to you while you wake up. It's 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, you're right. So I think you've obviously got to take all of that into account.
Yes, yes, yes.
And kind of, you know, depending on when it happens, you've got to deal with it kind of
Yes,
accordingly.
yes.
Did you ever develop a fear of having them again?
Yes, I was very fearful when the next attack will happen, that I would actually make myself ill thinking about that tonight I may have another one of these attacks. Yeah, but you just have to learn to hope that it won't happen, and if it happens, then you deal with it when it happens.
Okay, but I think it can be quite frightening, as you say.
It's
the
it's yeah,
anticipation of,
yeah.
you know,
It's
it happening again, and even some people, I think, become fearful of going out. You know, if they've had a panic attack when they're
Yes,
out
yes,
during the
yes.
day,
Yes.
I think a lot of people would avoid going out. You know, so that can then become a phobia as well.
yes, yes.
So it can really be very debilitating.
Indeed.
And Joanne, in terms of what the cause of the panic attacks were, did you ever discover, or do you have an idea of what?
I've got an idea. I had quite a bit of trauma happen in my life from my early 20s, and that's a long time ago. My first job that I had, my boss tried to rape me. Then I just left. I just left the job. I ran out. I managed to get away, thankfully. My second job, and this was all within like a couple of years difference. My second job, I got held up at gunpoint as a teller at a bank. Also tore me apart, couldn't concentrate for months.
And did you ever deal with those traumas, Joanne?
Unfortunately, those days no trauma counseling was given by companies or by anybody. It just was unheard of. You had to deal with these yourself. And I think I dealt with them quite well, or I thought so at the time. I didn't know that it would actually trigger off other things later in life. So that was the first two deals that I can think of. Then had another trauma a couple of years later. My younger sibling got murdered, and I was the only person at home. I had to deal with identifying body, getting to mortuary, dealing with authorities, that type of thing. So that added to my anxieties.
So you've been through major traumas.
Yeah.
Obviously accumulate.
Yeah, and that was over, I mean, these three happened in a space of like 5 years. Then I thought I had a break, and then about 4 or 5 years later, I went into another trauma where I was in my shop, my husband standing next to me, and a shot went off. And then at that moment, I shut down. I just had a blackout, thinking that my husband was shot. I wasn't sure, but that I went into a blackout. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I was 6 months pregnant at the time and went into labor later that day.
From the shock of
the gunshot. And my child was born at 6 months, which if you can understand it, a 6 months baby, it's a problem. It's a trauma.
Which was another trauma, must have been another trauma, because it comes with its own issues. And
exactly. So, and that trauma was a much bigger trauma, because the next 5 years of my life and my child's life, it was just a trauma. And anyway, I dealt with all these, I think, quite well. And then a few years later, when I thought we were back to normal, life was back to normal, that's when my panic attack started. And carried on for about 10 years.
Okay,
so that is my story, basically.
Thank you for sharing that, Joanne. I mean, it sounds like you've been through a lot. And as you say, as much as you did your best, you felt that you had obviously dealt, with those traumas, it sounds like it had a cumulative effect.
Yes.
And we know that trauma that's not processed gets stored in the nervous system.
Yes.
And you must have had triggers, as you said, at a later stage, which then shows us that there was something that was probably not
It wasn't
resolved.
dealt with, None of my traumas were dealt with in life. I had to deal with them myself, which makes me stronger, I assume. But obviously you can't control your nervous system, so the nervous system plays up and says, no.
You haven't actually dealt with it.
You haven't dealt with it.
And I think that's, as difficult as it is to acknowledge that, and as you say, at least you were aware of the traumas, because some people are not aware. And these panic attacks come out of nowhere, and we cannot always understand where they come from or what caused them. And as you say, in your case, it could have been, and it sounds like
it could be one of those,
but it does give us a clue into, as you say, that something is not resolved in the nervous system. So at least the hope in that is that if there was trauma that obviously caused these panic attacks, that we can then treat it. If we deal with the underlying trauma, then those symptoms should cease.
Yes.
How did the panic attacks?
They stopped. They stopped, yes. But I still have fear of darkness, and I think it's all when that day that I had that blackout from the gunshot. That's the fear of darkness for me. So I still don't do well sleeping in a dark house
So you see, that's the trigger.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So that's
normally when there's a trauma, trauma happens, whatever we thought of at that time, whatever we saw, whatever we heard, whatever our experience was, gets locked in the nervous system. So then, as you say, years later,
yes. Yes.
there's a reminder. The darkness is an association. So it kind of takes us back to that time.
That's it. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So
yeah.
that's really interesting. Okay, that you have an awareness of it.
Yes. Yes.
So now you said you still have the fear, but
The
not
fear.
necessarily
Yes.
the panic attacks.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of dealing with those underlying traumas, do you feel that you?
I think I have put them behind me, and I don't need to deal with them anymore. Sometimes I do feel the need to talk. I do speak to people about it, and I think I've dealt with it myself very well. So I don't think I need to go back to treat those traumas. They are past behind me.
And in those 10 years that you had the panic attacks, did you?
No, I didn't have counselling.
Okay.
No, never had
but
counselling.
As you say, somehow you were able to come to terms with it,
yes.
to accept it, to put it behind you.
Yes, indeed.
And you're not having those symptoms of panic anymore.
No,
okay,
not at all.
Which means that it clearly has been then processed. As much as you have the fear, it doesn't lead to...
It doesn't lead to the attacks, yes.
Okay, so from your experience, what advice would you give to somebody who experiences a panic attack, in terms of how to deal with it?
I think if you can try and get to the source of the panic attack, think back years, what happened to you, analyze what happened to you in your youth, many years ago, in circumstances that you felt trauma but you didn't deal with it. And that slowly by going back to those traumas, it will free you from the trauma. And that's what it did to me. I'm free of those traumas. I don't think of them anymore. I've dealt with them in my own way.
Okay, so it's about going back, trying to understand what's caused it. You said you spoke to people about it. You dealt with it in your own way.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that gives, our viewers a lot of hope, to know that it is something that can be overcome. It's not something that you have to suffer with for the rest of your life. And it is about, I think, gaining an awareness and understanding of, what you've actually been through, dealing with it, maybe looking at it in a different way, and coming to terms with it.
Yes.
And at the time of the actual, panic attack, what would you advise people to do in that?
Loosen up of clothing, get to some fresh air somewhere. If you have a fan, put a fan on. If not, go to the window. You need something with nature. You need air from nature. I've tried a lot of other methods like blowing in a bag, that type of thing. It doesn't work.
It didn't work for you?
No, it didn't work for me. So I would think fresh air and loosening up your clothes.
Okay, and breathing, maybe, taking deep breaths in. But
you can't breathe. That's a problem. You can't breathe. There's nothing there.
Okay.
At the moment, there's no breathing there at all.
And Joanne, can I ask you, were there any other triggers? You said the darkness was a trigger for you?
The darkness, it's always been a trigger for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And nothing else that you felt in your experience?
No.
Okay. So there definitely was that association.
Exactly.
That and in that moment when you said you blacked out with your that incident with your husband, did your body shut down?
Completely shut down. Shut down. I could say I couldn't hear, see, didn't know where I was. It was just a blackout, complete blackout.
Okay, which shows obviously that your nervous system in that moment went into a freeze, went into
Yes,
a shutdown.
yes,
So
yes.
obviously there was this threat, you thought that your husband was shot, and so our nervous system, either our fight, our flight, or our freeze response kicks in.
Yes.
Yours was the freeze, so our system does what it needs to in that moment, in order to survive. So you had
Yes.
that shutdown, but as you said, must have been pretty terrifying for you.
It was, but at that moment there was nothing. I couldn't feel anything, see anything. It was
And when you woke up, is that when you went into labor?
when I woke up, I thought I was fine, and I was in labor, and I didn't know. It was just too early to be in labor at 6 months. But I was in labor, and I had to give birth a day later.
Okay, so it was very soon after
Yes,
the incident.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and if you had to describe that experience of then having to, as you said, you didn't expect as well to go into labor. It was not something.
It was a nightmare. I don't wish upon anybody. And what goes with that, to have a baby at 6 months, and they give you 3% chance of the baby living. It's not a good thing. I wasn't in a good space for at least, I would say, 5 years.
After that.
Yes, dealing with the trauma that the baby was going through as well. It wasn't only me.
Because I'm sure there must have been complications. There must have been health
Terrible,
issues.
very sick baby, very complications, heart surgery, you name it. This child had to go through.
So you just had trauma upon trauma. It kind of loaded your nervous system.
Yes, yes.
So it would actually make sense then, as you say, years later, that those panic attacks were symptomatic of all that trauma that you had been carrying. And I think that's really important also to understand in a country that we live in like South Africa, where we are exposed, I think, to abnormal levels of trauma, of stress.
Yes.
That many people's nervous systems are very loaded.
Yes.
So I think it's important, if we could kind of just, impart that to the viewers that we need to get it out. We need to find healthy ways. Also, using the body, through exercise, releasing a lot of the trauma, going and speaking to somebody, getting help. I think it's really important if you do
also, these days you could go online and chat to other people that have similar experience to yours, and share their experiences.
And how do you think that's helpful?
It would help you because at least you're not the only person on earth that's having these panic attacks. So it
normalizes it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So I think that's important, and I think the hope of also this, this series is to help people to understand, that they're not alone. That many people struggle with different mental health issues, and we can overcome it. We can deal with it. You're not the only one. Many people struggle with it, and as you say, when you know that somebody else has gone through, the same experience, I think it's really helpful. So, thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm sure it's going to help many people to understand that they're not alone. That there is hope. If you are struggling as well, you never reached out to a professional or a doctor. From what I understand, was there a reason for that at the time?
It wasn't offered those days. You talk about 30 years ago. These things weren't. It wasn't the norm to go to a psychologist. So you just had to deal with that yourself. Unless it was really bad, then you land up in a hospital.
So as you said, times have changed, thankfully. I think we are more aware of it, and that's obviously what the hope of this series is, is to tell people that you can get help. You're not alone. If you are struggling, to reach out. And I think very important just to reiterate that if you are having a panic attack, try and, like Joanne said, think of a safe space, a space where you felt relaxed, you felt some piece of joy at some stage in your life. breathe if you can. If you can't, go to the window, get some fresh air, loosen your clothing, drink some water, even splashing. I think splashing your face with a little bit of water.
Yes, definitely.
If you can, you know, as you say, lighting a candle maybe with a bit of a fragrance, something to
Distract you, actually,
and to kind of focus on something different, you know, whether it has to do with any of your senses, or focus on things you can hear or see in your visual space.
Yes.
I think all of those things, as you say, definitely do
definitely
distract us and take us out of our anxiety. So thanks, Joanne. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure it's going to help many people to know that they're not alone.
I hope so.
I think it's given people an understanding of you know, how to deal with their panic attacks, to try and also get to the source, you know, to understand
that's important.
that there is trauma. You know, it doesn't, as much as it feels like it comes from nowhere, those triggers, as you say, often hold the clue. You know, there's something that's happened, and then it's kind of locked in our nervous system. And to get help, you know, I think, you know, and to ultimately know that it can be overcome.
There is help now, which is, it's a lot easier, I feel, for people suffering with panic attacks. At least you can go to your psychologist and get the help that you need, or visit the space that you need to visit.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, so
Thank
I hope
you.
this
You're
is
welcome.
helpful.
I hope
and
so too.
Please like, subscribe, share. And thanks, Joanne. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Liana. Thank you.
Thanks.